Have you ever noticed how some people stay quiet, and yet somehow they're the ones everyone watches? They don't try too hard. They don't chase attention. They just are, and that's enough. And the strange part? Even when they're not around, people still feel their presence. There's a quiet power in not always being available, because the more available you are to everyone, the less value they place on you. Think about that. Always being there, always saying yes, it starts to feel normal to them. And when something becomes too normal, people stop seeing it as special. Now here's the scary part. Most of us were never taught this. We were taught to be kind, to be helpful, to always show up, but no one told us the cost of being too present. Friedrich Nietzsche, he saw this clearly. He believed real strength comes from learning how to stand alone, to live without constantly needing approval. He wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." And the person who has a strong why, they don't chase, they choose. They don't panic when they're not invited. They don't beg to be seen. They hold their space because they know their worth. In this video, we're going to break down why being too available might actually be ruining your life. And more importantly, how you can start taking back your time, your energy, and your self-respect without becoming cold or distant. Ready? Let's begin. The invisible power of those who withdraw. Think about this for a second. Why is it that the person who says less, who doesn't always show up, or takes their time to respond, is often the one who gets more respect? There's a quiet strength in not being constantly present, because when something is always there, it starts to blend into the background. And the same happens with you. The more available you are, emotionally, mentally, and physically, the easier it becomes for people to take you for granted. Not always out of cruelty, but out of comfort, out of familiarity. And as the old saying goes, familiarity breeds contempt. Nietzsche never used those exact words, but he warned us about something deeper. He said that the will to power, the drive to shape your own life, requires that you stop letting others shape you through their expectations. Because every time you say yes when you really wanted to say no, every time you reply instantly even when you're tired, every time you show up even when it costs you your peace, you're teaching the world that your time, your energy, your presence is always on sale. But here's the truth most people don't say out loud. People value what they have to wait for. People respect what they can't predict. When you choose to withdraw, not out of anger, but out of self-respect, everything changes. Suddenly, your silence says more than your explanations ever did. Your absence becomes presence. Your space becomes sacred. You no longer have to convince anyone. You no longer have to perform. Because like Nietzsche said, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. And when you know your why, you stop wasting your life trying to prove your worth through constant presence. You begin to protect your space. You begin to protect yourself. Now imagine if you flipped the script. What if you stopped being the one who always texts back first? What if you didn't rush to explain yourself every time someone was upset with you? What if you stopped showing up out of guilt and started showing up with purpose? At first it sounds uncomfortable, maybe even a little scary, but just think about it. What would really happen if you chose silence over explaining, stillness over reacting, distance instead of always trying to fix everything? Would some people pull away? Yeah, maybe. But the ones who care about the real you, they'd come closer. Because now you're not being loved for how useful you are, you're being seen for your presence. That's the difference between being needed and being valued. Nietzsche once said, "Become who you are, not who others expect, not who guilt or fear tells you to be, but who you choose to be once you stop trying to please, fix, or explain. See, meaning doesn't come from how many people like you. It doesn't come from how often you're there for others. It comes from something deeper, your ability to overcome your own habits, to say no when you've always said yes, to sit with the silence rather than rushing to fill it, to build your own life instead of managing everyone else's. So here's the real question. What would your life look like if you stopped living for reactions and started living for your truth? Here's where the truth really starts to show itself. Being overly available, it's not always kindness. More often, it's fear. Fear of being forgotten, fear of being replaced. Fear that if you're not always there for others, you'll stop mattering. But Nietzsche saw through that illusion. He once wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." In other words, if you're always trying to belong, you risk losing the part of you that's meant to become. And here's the hidden mechanism most people never notice. You keep saying yes, not because you want to, but because you're afraid of what happens if you say no. You feel seen when you're useful. You feel loved when you're needed, but deep down, you're tired. Tired of being the dependable one. Tired of giving so much and barely feeling appreciated. That's not generosity. That's emotional programming. A belief planted deep inside, maybe since childhood, that your worth depends on how helpful, agreeable, or available you are. Your ego craves the praise. Your shadow, the hidden part of you, just wants to scream, "Leave me alone." But you don't. Because part of you is terrified. Terrified that if you stop serving, you'll stop being loved. It's like leaving your front door wide open all day, every day. At first, people knock. Then, they start walking in uninvited. Eventually, they stop saying thank you. They just take what they want and leave. And the worst part, you start to think that's normal, that this is what love looks like. But it's not real love. Real connection doesn't demand your constant presence. It respects your boundaries. It grows stronger when you finally learn to stand in them. You were taught that being a good person means being available, always ready to help, always ready to answer, always showing up, even when you're tired, overwhelmed, or drained. But here's the truth. Most people won't say out loud. Constant availability doesn't make you more loved. It makes you easier to use. It turns your kindness into a kind of currency, one that others spend freely, often without even realizing it. But this is not about becoming cold, it's about becoming conscious, not about rejecting love, but finally turning toward yourself. Because when you're always fixing, always replying, always on, you begin to disappear. You stop living your life and start managing everyone else's. So let me ask you something. Who are you when you stop being the fixer? Who are you when you stop replying just to keep the peace? What do you become when you finally reclaim your time, your space, your silence? Why do you feel guilty when you say no? Who made you believe that boundaries are selfish? And when was the last time someone gave you the same energy that you always give them? Nietzsche lived this truth. He walked away from fame, from approval, from the academic world, so he could write in silence, alone, far from the noise. Because he knew the deepest truths don't come from constant reaction, they come from reflection. In his work, Nietzsche spoke of the Übermensch, the one who rises above society's expectations, the one who doesn't follow borrowed values, but creates their own. Søren Kierkegaard, another philosopher, once broke off his engagement with the woman he loved, not because he didn't care, but because staying would have meant betraying his inner truth. That's what real power looks like. Not loud rebellion, but quiet, self-loyalty. And even now, think about the people you truly admire. Are they the ones who are always online, always replying, always saying yes? Or are they the ones who speak rarely, but when they do, it matters? The ones who protect their space, their voice, their energy, and in doing so, gain real respect. So if you're feeling tired, drained, invisible, maybe it's not because you're not enough. Maybe it's because you're giving too much to people who expect it and don't respect it. You've been taught to fear being forgotten, but what if the real danger is forgetting yourself? It's time to stop living for approval and start living in alignment with the one person you've ignored for far too long, you. Reclaim your time, reclaim your boundaries, reclaim your voice, reclaim your power, because the more you respect your energy, the more the world learns to do the same. And if this message spoke to something deep in you, consider subscribing to the channel. This is just the beginning of choosing yourself, of becoming who you really are.